Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I am happy to meet you all. Today, my goal is to go over the Speedroid deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links and explain to you guys the cards that you should be using, the cards that are not so great, and the main combo line strategies and what you can expect playing as the deck and how to beat the deck moving forward. So, what you see in front of you is my current list. I've bounced around through several iterations of this list, but the core of the deck I have solidified and the back row is flexible. So let's talk about the core. We have 13 cards here. 3 copies of Wind the Wind Channeler, 1 copy of Speedroid Terror Top, 1 copy of Speedroid Fuki Madoshi Piper, 3 copies of Speedroid Take Tomborg, 3 copies of Speedroid Double Yo-Yo, 2 copies of Den Den Daiko Duke, and 1 copy of Red-Eyed Dice. The deck is somewhat expensive. You do need to go through a mini box 3 times, which is 15,000 gems. It's not as expensive as if you wanted to go into a main box, for example, and get at least 2 copies of the Ultra Rare, because then it would be 18,000 gems, and if you need 3 copies of the Ultra Rare, it's 27,000. So, not that expensive, but it's definitely a deck that you're going to need to invest in if you want to play it proper. Why do we need 3 copies of these 2 cards, Wind Channeler and Take Tomborg, that are one-ofs in the box? Well, Win is a very powerful search card. What Win the Wind Channeler does, for those of you who haven't read it, is you can discard this card and one other Wind monster to add 1 Wind monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. Also, you cannot activate monster effects for the rest of the turn except Wind monsters. So, you take Wind and you take any other Speedroid in the deck, and you can replace them with one Speedroid that you want in particular. This Speedroid will usually be Terratop, but if you've already got Terratop, you might get Take Tomborg or Double Yo-Yo. So basically, Win is a very flexible card. She's like a searcher that requires a discard, so very similar to Speedroid Scratch, which is not currently in the game. There are a few cards in the deck, Den Den Daiko Duke and Red-Eyed Dice, which you actually want in the graveyard. So this is a good setup card. Definitely a card I would recommend at 3. Speedroid Take Tomborg, on the other hand, has an effect where if you control a Wind monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. And you contribute this card to special summon 1 Speedroid Tuner monster from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Wind monsters. You can only special summon Speedroid Take Tomborg by any effect once per turn. So if you can't special summon Take Tomborg, activate its effect to tribute it, then normal summon Double Yo-Yo and revive it, and then use its effect again. That's not going to work. Now, you can use Take Tomborg's tribute effect multiple times if, for example, you normal summon it and then you special summon it. There is no restriction on how many times you tribute it to special summon a tuner from the deck, but you can only special summon it in any way once per turn. This effect is extremely powerful. It allows you to fix your board, whatever non-tuner you have, pair it with Take Tomborg, and get the right level and effect of the tuner that you want. This will allow you to very consistently go into whatever Synchro monster you're looking for, typically Clearwing Synchro Dragon, and the card has very few restrictions. You can't special summon non-wind monsters for the rest of the turn. No big deal. We just use a bunch of wind monsters, so who cares? The other cards, Terratop is a one-of simply because we only have 1 copy of it. If we could run 6 of this card, we would. If you control no monsters, you could special summon this card from your hand. That is not once per turn. So if you special summon Take Tomborg and your opponent compulsory evacuations devices it, you could just special summon it again. There's no restriction, as long as you don't have a monster. When this card is normal special summoned, you can add 1 Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand except Speedroid Terratop. That is a hard once per turn. So it's a free special that also draws you a card. And that card will typically be either Take Tomborg for a Synchro play, or Double Yo-Yo if you already have Take Tom. And you need Take Tomborg and Double Yo-Yo to get you tuner monsters, of which we have 3. Red-Eyed Dice is the main one. And this card allows you to change the level of any other Speedroid on the field to any level you want between 1 and 6, which is very flavorful. It's a dice, of course, but you don't have to roll a dice, you get to choose. This effect is not once per turn, so you can use Red-Eyed Dice's effect over and over and over again. We will see this when we get High Speedroid Cork Shooter, because High Speedroid Cork Shooter is a Synchro monster that allows you to revive the Synchro materials used to make it, which will be Red-Eyed Dice, and then you'll use Red-Eyed Dice to change the level of the monster again, to make it 4 so you can go into Hogoida immediately afterwards. That is going to be a fun, fast combo deck that I'm sure all of you will enjoy. So keep an eye out for Speedroids moving forward. But for right now, the deck is fun anyway. Another tuner that we have is Speedroid Den Den Daiko Duke. The reason why we run 2 of this card is because it is the most common target for the part of our skill Clearwing Acceleration, which allows us to dump a tuner monster from our deck to the graveyard. We want to make sure that Den Den Daiko Duke is in our deck to send to the graveyard. So we run 2 copies of it, and then we can continuously dump it to the graveyard so that we can then revive it or use its effect from the graveyard to special summon a tuner monster from our hand or graveyard. It's level 3. That means it pairs perfectly with Double Yo-Yo, which is level 4, and you will use this card very frequently. The last one is Fukimadoshi Piper. This is the one that I am the least strict about. It's a free card, so you can run it very easily, and it is very beneficial going second. And we'll get into the combos in just a moment. This card is very good going second. The main drawback of running this card is that this card takes the place of a second Speedroid Red-Eyed Dice, which means that you are more likely, if you run the Fukimadoshi Piper, to brick on Red-Eyed Dice in your hand and not be able to get a copy of it in the graveyard to use with Double Yo-Yo because you don't have the ability to mill it from deck. You can overcome this with Win the Wind Channeler. Win the Wind Channeler can simply discard Speedroid Red-Eyed Dice if you draw both of them. But if you draw just Red-Eyed Dice by itself, you're going to have a harder time going first than if you had 2 copies. Okay, let's talk about the combos. So our extra deck has Stardust Warrior, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, High Speed Roid Kite Drake, Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, Battle Wasp Azusa Ghostbow, High Speed Roid Hagoida, and Jet Warrior. I have already demonstrated the going first play for this deck in my first video, the Speedroid Cog gameplay video, which you guys can find on my channel. But let's run through it real quick. So the combo is a 2-card combo. All you need is Terror Top and either Taketamborg or Double Yo-Yo. And you also need Red-Eyed Dice to not be in your hand. You activate your skill, which will then allow you to send a Speedroid tuner from your deck to the graveyard. You send your copy of Red-Eyed Dice to the graveyard. Then you special summon Terror Top with its own effect. Use its effect to get either Taketamborg or Double Yo-Yo with the one that you don't have. Then you normal summon Double Yo-Yo and revive Red-Eyed Dice. When Red-Eyed Dice is summoned, you target Terror Top and you change its level to 4. Then you combine Red-Eyed Dice with Terror Top to make High Speed Roid Hagoida in the extra monster zone. You then special summon Taketamborg with its own effect and tribute it to special summon Den Den Daiko Duke from your deck. Den Den Daiko Duke is level 3. You combine it with High Speed Roid Hagoida to make Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon in the extra monster zone. Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon does require a non-tuner synchro monster. Hagoida fulfills that condition. Now that you have Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon in your extra monster zone, and you have Speedroid Double Yo-Yo in your main monster zone, you can now banish Den Den Daiko Duke from your graveyard to revive Speedroid Red-Eyed Dice. Now, it's very important that when Speedroid Red-Eyed Dice hits the field, you do not activate its effect. You cannot change the level of a monster to the same level that it already has. So if you activate its effect, you will have to change Double Yo-Yo to a level other than 4, which will ruin your combo. So don't do it. Then before you do anything else, you activate Hagoida's effect from the graveyard. While you control a Speedroid tuner monster, you can revive Hagoida. So you bring Hagoida back, then you tune level 1 Red-Eyed Dice with level 4 Double Yo-Yo to summon the level 5 Wind Synchro tuner monster, Battle Wasp Azusa the Ghostbow. There's nothing special about this card. She's just level 5, she's a wind monster, and she's a synchro tuner. That's all we need. Combine Azusa the Ghostbow with High Speed Roid Hagoida to make Stardust Warrior. Now, you at this point will either have 1 or 2 cards left in your hand, depending on whether you needed to use Win the Wind Channeler's effect to search one of the cards from your combo. If you didn't, and you opened literally Speedroid Terror Top in one of these 2 cards, great, you have 2 cards left. If you did have to discard Win the Wind Channeler, then you have 1 card left. That is likely some sort of back row. Hopefully it's Forbidden Lance. You set your back row face down, and you pass to your opponent. Now you have a monster negate and destroy, and a monster that cannot be destroyed in battle by a monster that is level 5 or higher. I mean, it can, but it's going to have more attack points. And then Stardust Warrior, which can simply negate a special summon. This is a very useful card right now with all the Pendulum players running around. It's also a hard counter to other Speedroid decks, and it counters Resonators. So, 3 very common decks in the game. Also very good against Rockets. Rockets use Links, Exceeses, and Synchros, all of which can be interrupted by Stardust Warrior. So basically the only deck that Stardust Warrior is not very good against is Orchest, primarily because Orchest runs so much back row that if you don't have Forbidden Lance, then your opponent will probably remove Stardust Warrior before they do any Link summoning. But if they don't have any removal, or if you do have Forbidden Lance, then Stardust Warrior is also good against Orchest, as it can prevent them from even making Nightmare Phoenix, for example, which will cut them off their combo entirely without putting too many cards in their graveyard. Okay, so that is your turn 1, and you did not even use either copy of your Clearwing Synchro Dragon or your Kite Drake, so you still have quite a few options on turn 2. Now, there's one last card in the extra deck, which is Jet Warrior. Jet Warrior obviously is not a card that you can make with the main deck because you don't run Jet Synchron. The reason why this card is in the deck is that if Stardust Warrior is destroyed by your opponent's card effect or by battle, if it leaves the field because of a card effect, not just destroyed, you can special summon one level 8 or lower Warrior Synchro monster from your extra deck, which is treated as a Synchro summon. And when Jet Warrior is Synchro summoned, you can target one card your opponent controls and return it to the hand. So this is a good disruption tool, floating effect follow-up for if your opponent removes your Stardust Warrior. Typically they won't. Typically they'll just turn it face down with Book of Moon. But if they happen to destroy it with a card like Dragon Pulse Magician, then Jet Warrior will allow you to interrupt your opponent and put something back in their hand to disrupt their plays even further. It's also a decent body to have on the board. If you go second, you can special summon Terror Top and use this effect to draw Take Tomborg, then tribute Take Tomborg for Fukuyi Madoshi Piper. And the reason you want to do this is then you will get to immediately draw a card. You will have to reveal that card to your opponent, but you still get a card draw. And hopefully that card draw will be either Cosmic Cyclone or Forbidden Lance, allowing you to force your opponent's back row before you've even made Clearwing Synchro Dragon. The reason why this is beneficial is because Terror Top into Take Tomborg into Fukuyi Madoshi Piper does not use your normal summon. If you can successfully draw into some form of protection or removal before you finish Synchro Summoning, and you force your opponent to use a card like Compulse or Needle Sealing early, you still have your normal summon for follow-up, so that you can continue your plays and try and push for lethal even through your opponent's board. Fukuyi Madoshi Piper is actually even better for this than a card like Speedroid Red-Eye Dice, because even if you have a card like Forbidden Lance or Cosmic Cyclone in your hand already, your opponent doesn't necessarily know that. The reveal of Fukuyi Madoshi Piper is actually somewhat beneficial, as even though your opponents can play around it, they are also pressured by it. They know that it's coming, which means that they are more likely to try and burn these cards now, and they probably will forget, wait, my opponent hasn't even used their normal summon yet. What else is left in their hand? These kinds of mistakes can be exploited, and this is how you can win a game that you otherwise might not win, with a card like Fukuyi Madoshi Piper getting in your opponent's head and disrupting them. The card is solid, but it is also not necessary, because you can do the exact same thing if you had a second copy of Red-Eye Dice. Special summon Red-Eye Dice the same way using Take Tomborg, change Terror Top's level to 6, and make Clearwing Synchro Dragon. Exact same starter, you just don't get a draw, and Speedroid Red-Eye Dice's effect can be negated, and if Speedroid Red-Eye Dice's effect is negated, you don't get to Synchro Summon. So there are some advantages of running Fukuyi Madoshi Piper, definitely. The draw being the biggest one of them. But if you are bricking constantly on your Red-Eye Dice and you feel like the Fukuyi Madoshi Piper is making your turn 1 too much worse, then you can definitely cut it and run a second copy of Red-Eye Dice. I am running one of each, and I have found great success with it. The goal is to get into Kite Drake as fast as possible on turn 2, destroy every card on your opponent's field, or if they are running a card that protects their field like Dingirsu, negating all your opponent's cards, and then you can either send Kite Drake to the graveyard to make Clearwing Synchro Dragon with 4,100 attack points using the second part of the skill, or just make some follow-up, maybe banish Dendendaico Duke to special summon Fukuyi Madoshi Piper back for 1,000 extra attack points and go for it. Now, as far as the back row, you have a lot of options. Right now I'm running 1 Book of Moon, 3 Forbidden Lance, and 2 Cosmic Cyclone. And the reason why is Forbidden Lance is actually a good card going first and going second. Going first, you can set it face down, and then there are a lot of cards that your opponent might be running to try and destroy your Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon before they start playing the game. Cards like Dragon Pulse Magician, Book of Moon, mind control. You can protect your dragon from all of these and continue to use your negate while making your opponent waste a card. Going second, the card is obviously a very strong way to avoid disruption and continue playing through an opponent's back row while making synchro plays. It's basically a card that is fantastic going second and good enough going first. Cosmic Cyclone is good right now with dealing with specifically pendulum decks. It's good against Orcust going second because Orcust protects their back row with Dingirsu, but not every Orcust player is running back row right now. We are seeing a lot of hand trap variants. But the Cosmic Cyclone specifically is very good at removing pendulum players' pendulum scales before they begin pendulum summoning or activating their skill. And if you can remove enough cards out of their hand before they activate the skill, that might prevent them from even being able to Xyz summon it. I imagine that Cosmic Cyclone will continue to be a very important card after the Raging Pendulum skill gets nerfed, because if the Raging Pendulum skill gets any worse in terms of its card advantage generation, then removing the scales will impact the player's ability to play through removing the scales even more, because you will essentially cheat them out of one more very important card from their hand, which may mean that they can't make anything at all. We'll have to see what Konami does with the skill, but I do think the skill is going to be nerfed, and at that point, the Speedroid matchup against Odd Eyes will become better. Book of Moon is a good card going first and going second. There are a lot of enemy duelists running Steel Swarm Roach, and that is a card that we have a lot of trouble with, so Book of Moon is definitely a good answer to it. Now you might think, well, what about more than one Book of Moon? Definitely an option. There are other ways that you can play the deck. You can run 3 copies of Book of Moon instead of 2 Cosmic Cyclones if you wanted to. If you wanted to make more of a going first focused deck, you could run a card like Compulsory Evacuation Device. And if you wanted to play a deck that's better against Speedroids, better against the mirror, then you could run Electric Virus, which is a Gandora box. And this card lets you discard a card to target a machine or dragon type monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end phase. This allows you to force the Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon negate without running into lands. So you can force your opponent to waste their monster negate before you've even summoned a card, or you remove their dragon and it plays through Forbidden Lance because it's a monster effect. Those are all some great options. This is how the deck functions. This is what the deck is for. Now let's talk about the other copies of Speedroids. Chanbara is decent. If the extra deck was any larger, Chanbara might make a cut, as it allows you to attack twice, and you can return your Dendon Daikoduke to your hand if it gets destroyed. It's an okay effect, especially if you're running Speed Recovery, which I'm not, but I don't think it's worth the slot. Triad Dice is bad. It doesn't have a way to special summon itself. It's basically there so that you can play it with Speedroid Horse Stilts, and if we didn't have the skill that milled a tuner, that might be the play. But because we have the skill that mills the tuner, Double Yo-Yo is superior to Horse Stilts by a mile. So we want to play around Double Yo-Yo because Double Yo-Yo is the better card. And since Triad Dice isn't good with Double Yo-Yo, we don't run Triad Dice. Card Turbo is alright. It's a card that I've seen people use when they were playing Hagoida. If we get more cards that Hagoida can go into that are not Clearwing, Crystal Wing, and Kite Drake, then maybe this is a card that we definitely want to see because it allows you to very easily revive Hagoida, because you can just use Hagoida with Dendon Daikoduke or something and then special summon Card Turbo from your hand, bring Hagoida back and synchro again. If we have more options for level 8s in the future, that will definitely be appealing. For right now, I don't see it as the best option. Those are really the only Speedroid cards worth noting. Malicious Magnet is funny. If you want to play Malicious Magnet, more power to you. This card lets you basically snatch one of your opponent's monsters and synchro summon a Wind Synchro monster using Malicious Magnet and that monster. The only problem with Malicious Magnet is that it can't be used as a synchro material except by its effect. So if you don't use its effect, like if you have it on turn 1, it's a dead card. Okay, and that is the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is Neo Serafi, and I was thrilled to have you all with me.